On a quiet spring morning in April 1943, the ancient expanse of Hagley Wood seemed a world away from the global conflict raging across the Channel. This dense, tangled woodland near Stourbridge, England, was a sanctuary for locals, especially for children seeking adventure and escape. Resources were stretched thin by the war, and the woods offered a tempting, if forbidden, supply of firewood. On the 18th of that month, 4 boys, Robert Hart, Thomas Willits, Bob Farmer, and Fred Payne, ventured deep into the woods on just such a mission. As they pushed through the shadowy undergrowth, their eyes fell upon a large, twisted wych elm. Its gnarled trunk, split open by age, seemed to beckon. It was Bob Farmer who, driven by boyish curiosity, scrambled up its rough bark to peer inside the hollow center. He expected a bird's nest, perhaps, or the forgotten stash of a squirrel. What he saw instead would etch itself into the history of British crime. Staring back from the darkness was a human skull. Its empty eye sockets held the gloom of the tree's interior, and a few lonely strands of hair still clung to the bone. At first, the boys tried to convince themselves it was an animal, but the sight of human teeth made the horrifying truth undeniable. Panic erupted. Their illegal foray into the woods now felt sinister, dangerous. Fearing trouble with the authorities, they swore each other to secrecy, pushed the skull back into its wooden tomb, and fled. But a secret so grim is a heavy burden for a child to carry. That very evening, the youngest of the group, Tommy Willits, confessed to his father. The secret was out, and a chain of events was set in motion that would unravel a mystery far deeper than any of them could have imagined. The next morning, police arrived at the wych elm. Inside, they found not just the skull, but a nearly complete human skeleton.
With it were remnants of a life interrupted, a tattered piece of striped fabric, a single shoe, and a gold wedding ring. Nearby, partially buried in the leaves, lay a severed hand, as if scattered in a final, desperate act of concealment. The quiet woods had revealed their dark secret, and a question began to form, a question that would echo for decades. Who was the woman in the tree? The remains were carefully transported to the lab of Professor James Webster, a pathologist whose work would provide the first real voice for the silent victim. His examination began to sketch the faint outlines of a life. The bones belonged to a woman, likely in her mid-30s, standing approximately 5 feet tall. An irregularity in her pelvis suggested she had given birth at least once. She was not a skeleton that had been there for centuries. Professor Webster estimated she had been dead for at least 18 months, placing her death sometime in late 1941. Her teeth told a more specific story. They were crooked and uneven, with one lower tooth so out of place it would have been immediately noticeable to anyone who spoke with her. This dental signature was so distinct that investigators hoped it would lead to a swift identification. But when police dentists checked records from across the country, no matches were found. This suggested she might not have been a local, or perhaps came from a place where dental records were not as meticulously kept. The most chilling discovery, however, lay not in the bones, but in what was missing. A small piece of taffeta fabric had been stuffed deep into her mouth, a brutal and effective gag. The cause of death was clear: asphyxiation. She had been murdered, and her body placed inside the hollow tree while it was still warm, before the stiffness of rigor mortis had set in. She had been sealed within her wooden coffin, hidden from the world, left to the slow embrace of the forest.
With no missing persons report matching the woman's description and dental records leading nowhere, the investigation stalled. Who was she? The absence of an identity created a vacuum, and into that void rushed a torrent of theories, each one colored by the paranoia and uncertainty of wartime Britain. The most prominent theory was that of espionage. The area around Hagley Wood was not just quiet countryside, it was a hub of clandestine wartime activity. Nearby were munitions factories and shadow factories critical to the war effort. Not far away, at Blakeshall Common, intelligence services trained resistance fighters and spies for missions in occupied Europe. Could Bella have been one of them, a spy or a courier, silenced because she knew too much? This theory gained traction when an MI5 file from 1941 was declassified decades later. It detailed the interrogation of a German spy named Josef Jakobs, who had parachuted into the nearby county of Cambridgeshire. Jakobs mentioned his lover, a German cabaret singer and spy named Clarabella Dronkers. He claimed she was also due to be sent to England. Could Bella be short for Clarabella? The timeline fit. If she had arrived and been discovered by a British double-agent network, her swift, silent elimination would have been paramount. The theory was compelling, a narrative of intrigue and betrayal played out in the English woods. But another, far stranger theory emerged from the shadows of folklore. Dr. Margaret Murray, a respected anthropologist and historian, proposed a darker explanation. She suggested the murder was not an act of war but of ritual. The severed hand found near the tree, she argued, was evidence of an occult ceremony, the creation of a hand of glory, a powerful magical artifact in European witchcraft. In this telling, Bella was a victim of a local coven, her life taken as part of a dark, ancient practice. While dismissed by police, the idea captured the public imagination, casting a supernatural pall over the already grim proceedings. A third theory was more mundane, yet no less tragic. Perhaps she was simply a local woman, a prostitute or a transient, who fell victim to a violent client or a jealous lover. Her unusual teeth might have made her an outcast, someone whose disappearance would go unnoticed and unmourned. In this version of the story, her killer was not a spy or a sorcerer, but an ordinary man, a monster hiding in plain sight. Just as the case seemed destined to fade into an unsolved file, a new cryptic chapter began. In the spring of 1944, roughly a year after the discovery, a message appeared, scrawled in white chalk on a wall in the nearby town of Old Hill. In bold, uneven letters it asked, "Who put Lubella down the Wych Elm, Hagley Wood?" At first, police dismissed it as a tasteless prank, but then the message appeared again and again, on walls, on bus shelters, on a local monument. The name shifted slightly, becoming the now iconic phrase, "Who put Bella in the Wych Elm?" The graffiti transformed the case. It gave the nameless woman a name, Bella, and it carried a chilling implication. Someone out there knew more. Was it the killer, taunting the police, unable to resist reliving their crime? Or was it someone who knew the victim's identity, a friend or family member, using the graffiti as a desperate, anonymous plea for justice? The messages became a local legend, a ghost haunting the landscape. For over 50 years, the phrase would periodically reappear, scrawled by an unknown hand, ensuring that the town and the world would never forget the woman in the tree. The identity of the graffiti artist remains, to this day, one of the case's most profound mysteries. To understand the strange and persistent theories surrounding Bella, we must immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of 1943. Britain was a nation under siege, not just from bombs, but from fear. The government slogan, "Careless talk costs lives," was more than just a poster. It was a daily reality. Paranoia was a constant companion. Neighbors watched neighbors, and any stranger was viewed with suspicion. This climate of intense distrust was the fertile ground in which the spy theory took root. With thousands of foreign soldiers, refugees, and agents moving across the country, the idea of a secret war being fought in the quiet countryside was not just plausible, it felt probable. This was also a time of deep uncertainty, when people often turned to the past and the supernatural for answers. The revival of interest in folklore and paganism provided a context for Margaret Murray's witchcraft theory. In a world turned upside down by industrial warfare, the idea of ancient dark rituals held a strange and compelling power. The war had blurred the lines between the real and the imagined. Stories of espionage, occultism, and secret plots were not just fiction, they were woven into the fabric of daily life. Bella's case became a canvas onto which the fears and anxieties of a nation at war were projected. She was more than a victim, she became a symbol of the unknown dangers lurking just beneath the surface of a society in crisis. Decades have passed. The Wych Elm, the silent witness to the crime, has long since fallen to time. The boys who found the skull have grown old and passed away. Investigators have retired and files have gathered dust. Yet the enigma of Bella endures. Her case has become a cornerstone of British true crime, a modern myth that has inspired books, documentaries, and endless debate. It persists precisely because it is unresolved. It is a story without an ending, a puzzle with crucial pieces missing by design. The lack of answers is what gives the case its haunting power. It forces us to confront the limits of investigation and the reality that some secrets may never be unearthed. The name Bella, given to her not by family but by an anonymous chalk message, has ensured she is remembered. She is not just Specimen 1B, as she was designated in the police report. She is Bella, the woman in the Wych Elm. Her legacy is not found in a solved case file, but in the relentless, echoing question left behind by a ghost on a wall. A question that, even after all these years, remains unanswered. Who put Bella in the Wych Elm?